Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Faye. So I sat at a round table group with today's guest as part of the Innovate Cambridge project. I was immediately interested in him for a number of reasons. So he's come to the UK as part of a Tech Nation programme, bringing his family to Cambridge. He's a CEO at a super interesting company. He's a non-native. I'm not entirely sure if I can say that, but I just have. So I'm really interested to hear what he has to say about landing in Cambridge. So without further ado, let's welcome Gary Brotman, CEO of SecondMind, to today's podcast. Hi, Gary. Welcome to Cambridge Tech Podcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. So I want to start talking about you, please. So can you give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you found yourself to be in Cambridge?
Sure. A little bit about me. I am an explorer by nature, product guy by trade. I found Cambridge. It's funny. I came to Cambridge and visited back in 2014. It was my first time here when I was working at Qualcomm, and I had built a wireless whole home audio platform that companies like Panasonic were integrating to compete with Sonos. And it was shortly after Qualcomm purchased CSR. And CSR had a great Bluetooth business. They still do. They own Bluetooth around the world. And they were building a wireless audio or Wi-Fi audio platform as well. And I transitioned my product to the team here at CSR and moved into the core Snapdragon chipset group to head up the AI stuff that they were doing, which was unusual for me because it was totally different than my background. And when I came here, I was here for a full 24 hours in Cambridge. It was raining and foggy and like, wow, no sun. How am I going to do this? Well, I don't have to do this. I only have to stay here for 24 hours. And then fast forward to 2019, and here I am. I came here to live and work, but it's the last thing I expected to do after my first visit. But I came here because there was a great opportunity with a startup that had really interesting technology, great people, great investors, great recommendations, and an opportunity to bring my family somewhere else. And my son was 10 at the time, and give him an opportunity to build a broader worldview as opposed to the narrow one he would have gotten in the US at the time. I still believe that.
So the company that brought you over was SecondMind, right?
It had a different brand name at the time, but yes, it was same core technology. Mm-hmm. But if you look at that company then versus now, it's a night and day.
Okay.
Brilliant at the time, brilliant academic researchers, great ideas, lots of exploration, very little exploitation. I'm trying to use like machine learning and research terminology. I was hired as a VP of product and marketing. And the one thing that I can say that I did without a doubt before in the first year was rebrand the company. And it's a right brand for what we do. We're about helping, today it's engineers. Anybody make better decisions was the original premise, but be the second mind of the engineer. Help them do better at what they do, smarter, more efficient, et cetera. We're one step behind them. We're not in the spotlight. Lots of research and consulting and exploration, but there was no discipline around product and no focus.
Right.
And after a year of that, the board and the founders had an agreement to part ways, and they asked me and the CFO to figure out what do we have here? Like, is there something that we can take forward? Fortunately, we did. And we took a very specific problem in automotive, and we rebuilt the company around it. We were in 3 different industries when I joined and settled down in the automotive. And we can talk about that too. But yeah, it's a brilliant team of people. It's like the core, the creativity and the academic discovery element still exists in the core tech, and people like Carl Rasmussen, who's our chief science officer, still very much part of the core of the company. But the discipline and the focus are the big change, and having a sense of purpose, a real sense of purpose where we're headed.
So you say the product kind of assists engineers. What's a typical use case?
The first use case, and I guess a typical use case would be in the automotive business, we drive cars, and we all drive these cars that are more like computers than they are just mechanical pieces of hardware. All the systems have chips, ECUs, and they're running software with little lookup tables that tell the systems how to operate in certain conditions. So the first problem we had was with Mazda, and they had a problem with engine calibration.
Okay.
They have a very complex engine. They have a lot of complex stuff in the vehicles. They asked us to help them figure out how to manage the complexity with multiple parameters and constraints and the relationships between them. Problems that tools that were available and still are were unable to address due to the level of complexity. So what we do is we talk to the system that they have on the bench remotely. Our platform does. We call it the optimization engine. And for calibration engine, it talks directly to that system. It can be a motor or an engine or any system, and tell that system to run in a certain way to send data back. We'll run some experiments, build models. The models will increase in knowledge over time with every experiment. And half the time that you would with other tools, arrive at the values that tell the system how to run. Right. These values get flashed in a lookup table in the ECU.
And is this happening in like an R&D environment or real time in the vehicle?
No, it doesn't happen so it happens in production.
Right.
So our engagement initially is in R&D, and then they set up the tool chain for the production team, and the production team goes through this process with prototypes on a bench. And hopefully they got it right in the design. We're actually helping on the design optimization side too, but in this case, physical system on the bench, very expensive. You want to make sure that it doesn't break down, step out of bounds when you're testing. And we can typically calibrate a system in half the time that any tools that's out there can do today. Right. We're doing it all remotely. We're not doing it on-prem. Yeah. We can usually work with a significantly lower amount of data. On average, about 80% of the data that you would have is just taken off the table. Okay. So we're doing more or less, and it's not a marketing term. It's actually, we do it right. And with the less wear and tear, after less time on the bench, the prototypes really don't have the risk of breaking, so you don't have to fabricate as many in the next program. So there's real material savings, data savings, energy, and then just time. In an industry like automotive, you've got old, well-established processes and systems that still have to be built and run. You have to find a way to manage that complexity and wring out all the inefficiencies in those legacy processes so you can shift them to electrification, the things that are going to be built for the future. Right. And that's a tough job if you're a traditional automaker trying to transition.
Interesting.
So how did you select the automotive industry then? There could have been multiple use cases here. Why did you end up with the automotive sector?
As a combination of it was there in front of us and what we believed was the right thing to do. And I'll address the right there in front of us. So I think I mentioned when I joined, it was still more about consulting and exploration. And we were trying to address supply chain and finance. And there were a number of other industries that the company had explored in the 4.5 years prior to my joining. Automotive came in at the kind of after supply chain, which was the center of gravity for everything. It came in and you were seeing like really interesting results, like real results. The other stuff, manufactured results. Like in this big search area, we do really well in this little percentage. Right. But if you look across, it's like, why would anybody use this? It's not going to help them. The switching cost would be far greater than the value we'd get from it. But in automotive and this particular problem, the results were outstanding. You could just look at it and say, woof, we have something here. And there was quite a bit of spending. I mean, exploration isn't cheap. And at that point in time, when automotive started to show signs of life, we didn't have a whole lot of cash left. I think Series B, it was secured in May of 2019. And here we were the middle to late 2020. Yeah. So in a year and a half, there's a lot of that was gone. And COVID didn't make it easier for anybody. Right. So we're doing all this remotely. And our customers in Japan, and we couldn't send people to go see what a test bench looks like. Anyway, all this stuff, but automotive, this problem was great. We knew the problem would probably scale. The topology of the problem is not unique to just automotive or this particular application. But we had to make the call. We had to place the bet. Is this problem we're solving, is it big enough to bootstrap the next phase? And it was. And the thing that really, I go back to like, is it the right thing for us to do? We didn't have a real clear purpose as a company. Before it was, we're going to be one of these, great machine learning companies and a unicorn, and we're going to be successful and that sort of thing. It was the AI hype curve was still at the top. And in automotive, you have this very big challenge of emissions and climate change and the way that this industry has an impact on how we live our lives, healthily or not. And we all agreed that this was the right thing for us to do. It's like, if there's an industry that needs this, it's the automotive industry. And part of our purpose, part of our being is to help people become and companies become sustainable through machine learning. That's the undertone of what we have. And that's woven into our values, but it was the right thing for us to do at the time. And it was the right problem to start with because we were kind of proving it in the moment. And from a product perspective, you want to focus on one thing, get it right, beat it to death, and just relentlessly pursue it and build from there versus try to do 5 things at once.
Yeah, so I guess there's always a risk that when you're there to commercialize, that you stifle that level of innovation. But actually with you found a market with deep enough pockets.
You shared that question, so I had a little bit of a heads up on this one. I don't come from a world where commercialization and innovation are at odds with each other. Here, I can see that if you classify innovation as breaking new ground for the first time, and then once you've broken ground, it's done. From a research perspective, I think that rules the day, right? And as a researcher, and I have some brilliant minds in my office, the idea of solving the same problem twice is not terribly interesting. But you solve that one problem and you're on to the next. But what you really haven't solved the problem. You've solved the equation. But the problem is far greater than the equation. In fact, the product is more than just the technology. In fact, 9 times out of 10, it's not the technology. It's everything around it. It's the day-to-day with what the user does or the end user does to solve the problem, like the tools they use, the challenges that they face in every day, the workflow, the politics, all of that. So, Qualcomm's a perfect example of a company that just innovates all day long. They captured lightning in a bottle twice, which is amazing. But it was all about innovation. It was like engineering innovation. And we're just going to create stuff and we're going to find a problem to solve with it. And that, when you have deep pockets, that's great. But you do need discipline. And I think innovation in pursuit of the next big thing is great. But if you can't commercialize and it doesn't result in an impact, then it's a great exercise. And I think it goes just that far.
Ultimately, everyone's got to pay bills. You need to be brilliant. And I guess that was part of your role moving from Chief Product Officer Marketing into the Chief Executive role.
Yeah, I didn't expect, and I never had a CEO in my career path, to be honest with you. And I think given the circumstances, I probably wasn't the right candidate. Like, they were searching for a CEO. The CEO, in fact, before a prior CEO stepped back, there was a search underway. People have different talents for different stages. And I think the prior CEO saw where he was and where he was really going to make an impact for the company. And then if you get to the point, bring somebody in that has a big can of petrol and a contact list and is at a scale of a business, just light it on fire, right? There was a founder of a venture capital firm that I will not mention the name, but when I was pitching him last year, he said, "You're a tweener. You're not a startup and you're not a scale-up. You're a tweener. You're like in the middle, right? So if you're looking for a CEO, hotshot CEO with an idea isn't going to be able to do all that. If they've got something that's already a starting point, you're just going to carry it forward. And you don't have enough for the scale-up expert, right? So you're like, what do? You hire from within, get people that may have an idea of what to do with it and give it a shot. And that's what the board did with me. And I wish I'd done it 10 years ago.
Interesting. Why?
Because I liked the challenge. And I think the exploration side of me, I don't shy away from complex stuff, and I don't shy away from stuff that other people would. Like even at Qualcomm, when I was doing AI, when I started doing the on-device machine learning stuff, there were people that were dyed-in-the-wool, old school computer vision experts who never thought deep learning was going to make it beyond the data center. They're like, there's no way, it'll crush the battery. Like the way that we do it is always going to be the way we do it. And you could see R&D and these guys just at each other's throats. I'm like, I don't know, the data seems to prove that we're going to get more efficient and these use cases are far more interesting. And yeah, so it's like, take a chance. And that was the case here. And having the opportunity to try something new and the puzzle of people. Management and leadership, like the difference between the two, like management and organizing everybody is one thing, but to motivate, especially at times when things are difficult, and to inspire. I felt like an imposter early in my career when I tried to do that sort of thing. I'm not cut out for that. But then you're put on the front line to do it. And yeah, I dug it. It was kind of cool. I get scared to death sometimes, but I really like the challenge. Anyway, I could talk.
Have you taken the company on a bit of a kind of cultural change process then, as you've become more commercially kind of focused and like you say, with a big research team, how you've changed the mindset and the culture of how that research is then applied?
Yeah, I think I don't like to say that I changed anything. I like to think that I have provided the opportunity for people to change and given them a reason to do so, other than I just need my job. We had values as a company. They were kind of homegrown through the staff, but it wasn't something. Values weren't something that you actually used to make decisions and guide and to bind people together. At least the way I had seen it implemented, it hadn't been implemented that way, and there was no overarching vision or whatever you want to call that for the company. Right. So I established the purpose for the company, which was to help engineers in automotive build better cars faster, and that subtext of achieve sustainability through machine learning, because that's what we do. And then the values were ones that I carried a few forward, but I also brought new values to the table that I felt were the right things for the people that we had, what would ensure our success long-term, help us hire better, help us decide in times that we really are going to have a hard time deciding. And those things to me, and I say this a lot, it's either like the threads of the cultural fabric of the company. There is one thing that isn't as strong, and this is a challenge everybody faces if you're in a hybrid environment. So when everybody went remote, you lost that connection. Like I used to be a DJ in my prior life, and I still spin records, and I like the tactile feel of turntables and vinyl, even though I have a system that digitizes it on the fly. Yeah. But there's something about the analog, being in an analog, being proximal and communicating that you cannot replicate through pixels. And there's a cultural dynamic that doesn't exist when you're remote. Like you don't have the same connection. Now, people learn how to establish connections digitally, and that's not to say that one's really better than the other. In a startup, that can be frenetic and uncertainty is all over the place, and you need like people to kind of make it through because it's messy. That's the one part of the cultural dynamic that I think is more of a work in progress, because we are a hybrid. So a lot of people work remote. Some people come in. Research likes to be in every day. Other people like to be at home without distractions and coding. So yeah, there's not some teams come in at certain times, but I think that's the one thing that, if anything, more proximal communication and collaboration would be an additional element of the culture that we didn't have.
Are you kind of being more deliberate in the way, creating like events or reasons for people to come in on the same day, so you get that kind of...
Not as much as we could.
Right, okay.
So we're in the process of moving offices. Okay. And there's a lot of things that we're like carrying the lease on a big 3-story building that was designed for far more people than we have. Right. So we're finding an appropriately sized place. And with that, there will be an opportunity to make a number of different changes. Yeah. We're still going to be hybrid, but I think there are going to be ways to build excitement and energy into the new environment that we can't do where we are, and give people a reason to want to be together, and more events. And there's a whole slew of things. We were just talking about this today. There's a whole lot of stuff that you just kind of pushed aside when we went remote for COVID, and we never fully came back. We went through the leadership transition, and then we scaled back the company from 3 businesses to 1 back in the first quarter of 2021. So COVID was well underway. We went through this transition remotely more or less, which is very awkward. Yeah. Never want to have to repeat that ever again. But we hadn't really established a baseline together in person. Yeah. So we've been hybrid from the rebirth of the company.
I think so many companies are still trying to figure it out, right? I don't think it has to be a playbook that works for your own company and your own culture, really, doesn't it? There's the flexibility and the productivity gains from giving people flexibility to work where they want, especially based on job roles. But the social aspect, the kind of building the culture, building trust with your colleagues, that's so difficult to do remotely. But equally, post-pandemic, in a very competitive labour market, expectations now from candidates is quite aggressive, right? In terms of, you expect me to come to an office kind of thing. How have you seen that played out? Is it becoming an issue for hiring?
Well, it's funny. Again, literally, we were having this conversation today. We adapted our hiring practices to accommodate remote working. In fact, half of our staff is 20 miles away from the city.
Right.
We don't have anybody other than the Japanese office working in any other part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have an entity over there. Demographics, like if you're relatively new to the workforce versus you've been around for a while, that plays into the desire, the disposition of the candidate or people that are working there today. Yeah. Everybody has learned to adapt differently in their personal life. And you have habits and processes and burdens that you share with your partners and your family that are ingrained in how you live. Mm-hmm. So those are difficult things, and you don't want to disrupt those. Like, everybody's learned how to balance differently. Mm. If anything, I've established or have created a new idea of what balance really means in my life. Because balance to me, when I was younger and before I was in this role, was I have to find equity, right? There has to be real balance. It's like, it doesn't work that way. You grab moments in time and I focus on work over here, and because there's downtime or whatever. It's a fluid thing. Mm. And we were all forced to adapt to a situation that was pretty harrowing. And in doing so, we have different ways of working and different ways of living. And that's something we're very cognizant of. So we have to balance that with what's the right thing for the business. Mm. And it's not a static thing. Mm. I think it evolves over time.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting.
So in a short number of years, you've actually done an awful lot of things. Okay, so what I'm going to go for here is what are the highs and lows? What are the things that you could share with people? You've gone from a restructure, like you said, that must have been really challenging and not something that you want to do again. That's possibly, quite a low, but then you've repositioned and put the market into, a much more commercial stance. So what are the kind of highs and lows for you?
Well, on the highs, focus has brought clarity of thinking, and there's always uncertainty in a startup. Like, you can't get away from it. And one of the things that I ask people, I'm interviewing a VP of product right now, and the first thing I ask is, how are you with messiness and uncertainty and not having a blueprint? And a lot of folks I'm talking to work at big corporations like Siemens, and they've been doing that for years, and there's structure and comfort and all that. It's like, there's no blueprint here. We have great technology, great ideas. We think we're onto something, it may be wrong. We want to find out sooner rather than later. If it is wrong, we'd also like to find out sooner rather than later if it's right, so we can build the business faster. The highs, I think, having a customer like Mazda that was really like the reason to keep the company intact to some degree. If we didn't have Mazda, I think we would have stripped back even further. Like, we went from 86 or 90 people. When we focused on automotive, we went down to 55. Right. So it's a pretty big downsizing. It wasn't really a pivot as much as it was a focus. Without Mazda and this problem and Science of Life there, we would have gone right back into deep exploration with fewer people to spare whatever capital we had left. Mazda's taught us a lot. We've learned a ton. They helped us build a solution that licensed it back from us, and they are still teaching us. And that has led to more opportunity with more automakers and tier one providers and others in the ecosystem. So there's been a halo effect that has minimized our need to expend a lot of money on marketing. So those are wins. I think the challenges are trying to move faster, as fast as we can. Sometimes Mazda and the work that we do for them, and then balancing that out with the stuff that we know we need to do that nobody's going to pay for in an SOW, but is just as important. How do you challenge your ideas or perceptions of capacity and what you're capable of? You give somebody 6 months to work on something, they'll find 6 months. If you give them 3 months, they'll figure out. And that's a challenge. And productizing is a brutal effort. You try to rinse and repeat, but you might get lucky. You might not. You might have to build something new, try something new. The customer's problem is, even if it looks good on paper, it's probably different. What they told you is not really the problem. And that's a challenge. I'd say doing that and being able to do that faster and move at a pace that you can still spare the runway and try to create those opportunities for you.
So it's a customized product for each customer?
It's not for us. So
okay.
I'm just But
just
you
making
need
that
more
example.
opportunities to prove that, right?
Right,
You
right,
need to
right.
be able to take on more and parallelize.
Yeah.
We do have capacity challenges like any other startup. And like other startups that want to be able to grow, last year sucked. Like the market just clammed up. There's plenty of dry powder and plenty of money, but nobody wants to take the risk.
Yeah.
Like the bar is like exceptionally high relative to what it was in 2019 when this company got a lot of money for a promise, right? Now you have to have a product and you have to show ARR and you have to show that the pipeline will actually convert, regardless of like the stage that we're at. So the bar's higher.
What does the adoption look like from the customer perspective? Is it a disruptive style of integration? Because it sounds like you're right in the heart of some really important processes, but is it quite light touch then? Is it simple for the customer to adopt the technology or? So
upfront is not it's not low touch. Like we get in and we want to help understand the problem and see the data to see if, it's partly learning, but it's also, you can't just take this thing and integrate and go. The integration is fairly straightforward though. It's like we have a simple set of REST APIs and you plug into a tool chain and the OEM can choose to plug in to replace a tool on the bench or bypass something, but it's designed to be relatively simple to integrate technically.
Right.
And once it's integrated, it runs in an automated fashion. Okay. The engineer can interrupt. In fact, we actually like that. We call it blended intelligence. There's a lot of knowledge and decades worth of knowledge that's not captured in the data.
Right.
So we want to make it possible for the engineer to participate and not have the platform do all the work. Yeah. But if you're comfortable and you trust it, it can run in an automated fashion without anybody.
And are you pre-training the model with their historical data or you?
It depends on the problem. Okay. In a calibration world, we can either train with virtual data or we'll just grab data from the bench in an iterative way, do it really efficiently and experiment, objective met.
Right.
It depends. Each problem is a little different. Blending physics data with virtual data, that's an interesting challenge to virtualize more before you fabricate. Yeah. And that's a roadmap item. But today, system on the bench, pretty straightforward. But you do have this kind of, you got promise on one side and you got product on another side. We're probably 3/4 of the way on the calibration product to product. So there's still a fair amount of human in the loop. And then we're also using the same technology to optimize early stage designs and simulations. Right. So low fidelity simulators, we can make them, we can bring fidelity to them and we can give the engineer more choice when they're deciding how to design a complex system like a hybrid system in a vehicle. So same tech, the span of concept to first prototype, that's the broad area that we're focused on.
If you are a startup looking to grow in Cambridge, the Bradfield Centre offers a range of flexible membership packages which put you in control of your office and home working mix. There's a vibrant, collaborative atmosphere, on-site cafe, plenty of green outside space, and regular member social events. We also offer a range of high-quality meeting spaces for hire, and for tech event organisers, our auditorium, lakeside pavilion, and atrium spaces are perfect to bring your communities together for in-person and hybrid events. For more information, visit bradfieldcentre.com or call 01223 919 600.
Can we talk about money for a moment?
You got any?
Some, probably not as much as you've got in your funding rounds, let's put it that way. So my first question is actually as part of, I think, was it the last funding round you took funding from Chinese investment as well? So I'm kind of interested when the government is flip-flopping on its stance of doing business with China, how did that decision come about? Or was it just very much led from your investment portfolio?
That predates me. I will say that the Series B round was comprised of a lot of companies in supply chain because that was the primary focus. But also people that were investing in AI, that was still pretty hot. At the time, the political dynamics were quite different. It is a challenge. And I think we have to be mindful of a number of factors when we're going out to seek funding, and I spent all of last year, and I'm still looking for some capital. Our site's set on closing around, but everybody says that. I have to filter, like forced to, for regulatory reasons. But that particular decision was one that predated me.
Right. And did that create other challenges, the fact that they funded for supply chain and it's slightly different in terms of what
I thought
you're
it would
delivering now?
initially. Some of the smaller investors, they really don't, it's not relevant to them, so they're just kind of hanging on. But we do have a few, one of them being ReefNaut, which came in on the B round, and they're very anchored in supply chain. And it was a challenge. I felt bad going to the investor and say, look, we're pivoting. And he's turned out to be very supportive. We're not strategically relevant. And we're just purely like, let's see if we're going to make our money. But it was a pleasant outcome from a relationship perspective. But the investors that hold the most sway are the ones that are the primary on the board level. The rest are participating, and Tencent and Puha on the Chinese side, they're there, but there's no real impact to the business.
And you just touched on the board there as well. You know, you've got some pretty impressive names on that board. You know, as a tween company, how does that work? You know, with that level of people on the board, what are the pros and cons of that? And are there any lessons that you want to share?
When I joined the company, there was a fair amount of tension between the board and the executive team. And it's not something I experienced before, because in startups that I've been at previously, the board was your ally. They were your guide, like connections for business and just general guidance. It was more of a collaborative relationship, but it didn't seem like that existed when I joined this company. But they were also the most supportive in the transition, and they still remain supportive. Kevin Dillon at Atlantic Bridge, Herman Hauser, Ian Lane at Cambridge Innovation Capital. You know, I think everybody that still has portfolio companies that were invested in 3-year-old funds, ones that still show signs of life, they're happy to try to get as much as they can out of them, right? And if somebody's willing to take it on and try to take it forward, they've proven to be very gracious and flexible. They know where we are in our productization life cycle. They're not unrealistic in their expectations, and they give us a lot of support and latitude, and they've been very supportive of me. So my first direct interaction reporting to a board, I would want it this way.
We actually met, as I said at the top of the podcast, at the Innovate Cambridge roundtable recently. Yes. I'm always interested to hear people's views on Cambridge. And I think you come from a slightly different perspective because you've been here a few years. What do you think that Cambridge is doing right and wrong?
Well, I think obviously the thing that Cambridge is known for, and other cities are too, but Cambridge is known for its academic prowess, right? It's very difficult to beat that globally. And I think so many great ideas and innovations, as you say, come out of Cambridge for that reason. I think culturally, it's more liberal and free of thought, and you can express how you feel and discuss and debate. And that's having that opportunity without fear of retribution and is wonderful. In the United States, you express a view and you're usually going to get somebody that's going to challenge you. And I'm a little bit extreme in the way I say that, but there's less tolerance for opposing views. Here it's different. And while that's great, there's also a challenge when it comes to turning debate and decision into do. Like, let's just make a decision and do it, right? And I think that's one of the challenges that I've seen is you can analyze and debate for a very long time and get everything on the table, but at the end of the day, it's just, do we have to make a decision? Let's just make a decision. In our company, in talking about Innovate Cambridge, the initiative is wonderful. I think the idea of banding everybody together to say we're going to be a tech hub globally on the map, but it does require a fair amount of deliberate decision-making, not consensus and discussion. What else? I had written a couple of things down. Embracing failure, taking that risk and being willing to kind of fall on your face. It's not as accepting for a variety of reasons. Somebody I think when we met at the table, there was a very politically correct way of saying fear of failure. I said, no, it's abject fear. Let's just be straightforward here. Address it for what it is. It's painful, and it's different culturally to talk about failure and mistakes in California relative to here, at least I've found. But I do think here it's more cohesive, not just in the city, but in the country. I was trying to explain to somebody what it would have been like had my family been in the United States during COVID versus here, because we didn't have any family, no safety net, nobody to support us. We were on our own. We had some neighbors, but we really didn't know them well. We'd just gotten here. And I remember when the Queen came on television and spoke to the nation. It was like one of the most comforting things at that time. And the Queen, like you, and you have a much closer relationship to the monarchy than me. I came to visit with my parents when I was 3 years old. I remember changing in the guards, and I remember the Queen has been a part of my life, present. And to have her up there on television was a very comforting thing. And to think about what it would have been like in the United States, 50 states, 50 countries, 50 different ways of approaching this problem, and all individualism ruling the day. It's not about your neighbor. It's not about banding together. It's about, well, my rights. I'm glad I was here. My family, same thing. It took them a while to adjust, and they're still adjusting, but that was a very big moment for us to realize how fortunate we were to be in an environment where everybody's rowing in the same direction. Yeah, people on the fringe probably not, but by and large, that was wonderful. So that cohesion, I think, is something we really enjoy here versus the fragmentation and the divisiveness that we see back at home, or what was home.
Oh, that's interesting. So you count the UK as home now, do you?
I got my indefinitely to remain status in October. Mm-hmm. We still have discussions about how long this adventure is going to last, because it was a 2-year adventure when we first set out for it, but it's the different adventure than what I promised the family. When it's warm, the mood is better. The sentiment is different. And I've been told that if I talk about the weather voluntarily, that means that I'm kind of settling in.
Yep.
We really love it here. We do miss being back at home and people that we knew, and our families are still there. But we also know that there's different, more pronounced challenges socially and otherwise back there too. And I don't want to get into the details on that one, because these are all third rail issues that not worth the time to focus on.
Well, a third of our audience is in the United States for the podcast, by the way.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So this will resonate with a lot of the audience.
That's good. I can't speak to what it's like to live all over the United States, but I lived in Texas for a long time. We lived in Southern California. I'm from the Eastern Seaboard, so I've kind of big swaths of the country. But I think the polarization is far more intense there than in most places. And being removed, I can filter my news and I can see it more objectively. And yeah, it seems like it's far worse than when we left, even though the president's a different president. The divisiveness is it's worse. Oh. It's pretty remarkable. I'll leave it at that.
So what's next? What are your plans for the next few years?
Personally or professionally? Either.
You choose. Both.
Well, I mean, professionally, we're on a very good path to productization of at least one of the two would-be products that we have, and the other one has a lot of promise to be much more generalizable, not just in automotive, I think across multiple industries. So we have no plans on leaving automotive. In fact, we decided to embrace this, and there's lots of opportunity, and you've got complexity abounds in this world of the new, what they call the software-defined vehicle, like 1 billion lines of code running in a car that's supposed to protect you and entertain you at the same time. It's like, I don't have the phone here because I was told to turn it off, but this is your car. It's the phone. It's your mobile phone with wheels, right? That's what it is. It's an experiential thing, and the experience of driving and the concept of driving is completely different than it was 20 years ago. So that creates a lot of opportunity for us. We don't feel pressured to leave automotive. I tell the board this. It's like if something strategic came out of left field in semiconductor or in cloud compute or something, we listen, but I haven't solved this problem yet, and we're not going to repeat the mistakes of the past. But maybe there's a future after we productized some of the things that we're doing in automotive. And my job as a CEO is to create options, like go one path, become independent, build a business that way. If there are partners that can help us accelerate that, explore those paths too. We're a 2-year-old, I consider us a 2-year-old deep tech company with a lot more than a brand new company would in 2 years. So, lots of R&D that's already paid for and sunk, but still facing the same challenges as an early stage startup. But so I have to create optionality.
You mentioned the team shrunk down to 55. What are you at that kind of number right now? Or
We're
you've grown
43.
again? 43.
We're 43. Did a little belt tightening last year.
Yep.
When you can't get capital, you can't raise capital, and it's taking longer to get customers and bring new revenue, and it's just math. And I hate to say it sounds callous, because I certainly, as my first job as a CEO, I don't want to be known for contraction. I want to grow.
Right.
But we have very strong pipeline, longer time to convert it. We had to be very deliberate about how we spent the money, not knowing that when we were going to get additional capital or revenue.
Yeah.
So 43, and I don't share growth plans yet, because it's not really worth sharing. I just know we have a lot of opportunity in the pipeline, and I need more to convert it.
Yeah.
Personally, we're going to ride it out for a little while longer. And again, no plans to leave. I can see citizenship or dual citizenship on the horizon. I've already passed my life in the UK test. So maybe that was the hard part.
We couldn't do
First
that.
time.
Gosh.
We probably failed.
First time.
But
Can you tell us anything that's on it?
yeah, what are some of the questions?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well,
I could give you indications, but don't put me on the spot. Stuff that I wouldn't typically use in any setting, even in a trivia.
Sounds like most exams.
I thought it would give me a leg up at quiz night at the Sir Isaac Newton pub, but my family and I were so getting into that when we first came here. We loved going to quiz night at the Sir Isaac Newton pub, and we were dead last every weekend. We were just happy to be just participating.
Yeah.
Every now you get one or two questions right. There'd be something, yes, it's not a British
but
question.
everyone knows you though, and everyone was delighted every time you rocked up because you were always going to be the last.
We didn't get it. COVID hit before we had a chance to establish a reputation.
You'd been good in the music round though, right? If you're a DJ.
Oh yeah, music was fine. Although I'm not really a pop DJ.
Well,
I'm like a more of an underground kind of electronic DJ.
Okay.
So, and I was a DJ in Dallas at the time that the Manchester scene was raging and raves were a thing, and like acid house through Chemical Brothers and Fatboy Slim and
Left Field, all that kind of thing.
that was all that. Like that's in my DNA.
Nice.
I still spin records.
Love it.
That is my thing, man. I can just another time, another conversation.
Yeah. Open a
Well,
record store.
And if we find a pub quiz anywhere, we'll let you know. We'll bring you along and see if we can help.
I mean,
out.
I think it's good to have diversity.
Yeah,
we're
sure.
just like three wet behind the ears Americans had no freaking idea what we're getting ourselves into.
None of us do.
Exactly. Thank you so much for coming on today. It's been great talking
Well, thank
to
you. It was a great conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
So, James, that was another great conversation on the podcast, I think.
Yeah. Nice to get the perspective of someone that's new to the Cambridge cluster.
Yeah, it is. And I particularly like, me being the action-orientated person, the comments on getting things done rather than just talking about them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And he talked, James, about the weather as well, and I feel we should carry on and talk about the weather. It's actually been really nice. I don't want everyone to go away thinking it's always raining in Cambridge. It's actually been boiling hot, but I think this week might well have been summer.
Yeah, to be honest, it's passed me by because I've just been sitting in the air-conditioned Bradfield Centre all week and haven't stepped foot outside. So I'll take your word for it that it's been hot.
Yeah, lucky you. I'm currently melting in my office. It's a bit like reminiscent of the Wizard of Oz, and I'm melting. But anyway, there we go. That's the weather done. Lovely jubbly. So this week is another busy one. I think we started the week together, didn't we?
We did. We had a planning session. So this isn't just completely thrown together like it sounds.
James, don't say that. Honestly. Although I do think I had to rein you in on a few things. I mean, actually, we had some really good ideas and some new things coming up. But with everything else, it's very hard to fit it all in, isn't it? But I think we've got some exciting things to keep adding into the mix.
Yeah, I think that's the main takeaway. Expect some new stuff coming, like new formats, more guests, more news. I think we need to double down on the news a little bit more. So we talked a little bit about that. So we want to keep things fresh.
Yeah, but not new presenters, right?
No, I don't think so. Although that's probably what
we haven't discussed that together anyway.
no, that's just made the whole thing super awkward.
Well, tell me about your week then. What's been happening?
Just lots of stuff, really. No one. Well, I think the highlight actually was I caught up with Paul Smith, who I know we both know from Cam Creative. Paul's always great to spend time with and a great connector. And he recommended I have a chat to a guy called Alex Hughes, who's the founder of Inspire to Ignite, CIC. Just amazing. We'll talk more about this, I think, in the future. But another example of someone in the local area that's doing loads of really good work to help kids and young adults that haven't had the best kind of start in life really kind of get vocational opportunities, get inspired by that entrepreneurial mindset. So had a really interesting chat with Alex this week, and hoping that will flourish into a really interesting relationship with the Bradfield Centre.
Yeah, I mean, it fits very well with some of the other work you're doing there as well, doesn't it? And yeah, I know Alex. He's a very exuberant character, isn't he?
Yeah, he spoke at one of the Camp Creative events, and I think Paul connected the dots really well because, as you say, we're already doing some work with tech educators to try and, give access to technical training for people that haven't had the opportunities to go into higher education and university. How about you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, I brought Charlotte Horobin, who's the new CEO, new chief executive at the Cambridgeshire Chamber of Commerce. I brought her over to the Bradfield Centre, introduced her to you, of course.
You did.
And to Jane at the Jane Hutchins of Cambridge Science Park. So I had a really good conversation with her. That evening, I also did some mentoring at the IECT, which is it's like the Impulse programme, but it's in Hermann Hauser's homeland of Austria.
Right.
And I love doing that because, my background's all international, and actually talking to 3-4 companies there about what their plans are for tech innovation was really interesting. I've caught up with quite a lot of the smaller companies this week as well. So one of the Locate Cambridge companies, Govern Future, who's coming over from Turkey and opening up in Cambridge, which is exciting. Caught up with Ben Pellegrini from Intelligence, who was one of our previous episodes as well, Paul Beastle as well. He's ex-Cambridge Consultants, now got his fingers in the pies of Evenetics, and he's just become CEO of Hutton Bio, which was one of the 21 to watch companies. So I'm pretty sure that he's going to end up on the podcast early in the new year because they're doing some really exciting stuff. And yeah, just, do you know what? It's just really nice catching up with people in person. So that's primarily been what I've been up to this week. Amazing.
Should we move on to the news?
Let's do it. And it wouldn't be right if we didn't have news about ARM on the podcast, would it?
It wouldn't. And let's start there. Apparently, as early as next week, ARM could take America's tech-focused NASDAQ market by storm. Predictions for the valuation vary wildly, but the Japanese parent SoftBank is hoping for anywhere between $60 to $70 billion, which is double what it paid for the then UK-quoted Cambridge company in 2016.
Not a bad return there.
No, and we've got an interesting event coming up at the Bradfield Centre, which is very much related to ARM. We've got James Ashton, who's the author of a new book called The Everything Blueprint, the microchip design that changed the world. So James is going to be doing a book launch at the Bradfield Centre. So if anyone's interested in the kind of the ARM story, very much recommend you come along for that. So as soon as we get the registration site live, we'll plug that on the podcast and the Bradfield website.
Brilliant. Let's nobble him for the podcast in the nicest possible way.
Already have.
Perfect. What else? So Quantinuum, who have also been on the podcast, they've partnered with Airbus and BMW Group to develop a hybrid quantum classical workflow to speed up future research using quantum computers. The idea being to simulate quantum systems, and they're focused on chemical reactions of catalysts in fuel cells, which you'd kind of assume with Airbus and BMW Group. So things are definitely moving at pace in the quantum field as well. And then to add another one, actually I found this one out on LinkedIn in one of the company's posts. So later this year, we've got Seamus Hushier and Oriane Chaussio from Heartfelt Technologies coming onto the podcast. And they had news that they shared, and I might as well share it on here as well. They've actually won Santander's X Global Challenge in the AI Revolution Award, which is really exciting for them. So I'm looking forward to see how they're using AI to help millions of patients manage their own complex care needs. So we'll be able to pick up with them later on in the year.
Congratulations.
And I think that's it. It's next week we have Gerard Grech on.
See you next week.
Today's show was produced by Carl Homer of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner, Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It will really help others discover the show.